Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 175. You see, Peter, we're going to talk about England. I'm Kevin Carlson.
I'm the Reverend Peter Old, and today is May the 5th, 2015.
Okay, I can't explain it, but today with Skype, there's a little bit of a gap. It's kind of like a satellite delay, which is cool because Anglican TV doesn't run on satellite. But when I speak, there's like a 3 second gap. It's not Peter thinking slowly, it's the slow internet between our two computers. Peter, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. It's been a while.
Yes, it's been a little bit of a while. A lot's happened in England since we last spoke. And you have a lot happening in England this week. First, let's talk about what's going to happen on Thursday. You may have a change in leadership or a setup for a change in leadership. In America, we vote for president and we get to choose the president. It works a little bit differently in England. Explain the process.
Yeah, so on Thursday we have the general election. It's been 5 years since MPs were voted in.
Mm-hmm.
So across 650 constituencies across the United Kingdom, we will be voting for who we want to represent us in the House of Commons. And then unlike the United States, where the election of the head of the executive, it is Parliament and the MPs who choose who the Prime Minister is.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a president, we have a Prime Minister. The head of state is the Queen, of course, naturally. So we will, all the polls are indicating that this is going to be a hung Parliament. So no one party, the two big parties obviously being the Conservatives and Labour, no one party is going to have enough seats to run the show by itself. So there's going to be a period after the results come in where the different parties are going to have to see if they can make deals, make arrangements, either formal coalitions or sort of informal arrangements to support. And it'll take a bit of time to see who will actually run the country for anything up to the next 5 years.
Well, one of the interesting things that England has is that 14-day rule. You have 14 days to get your act together. If not, you have to recommend another leader to the Queen.
Yeah, so the Fixed Term Parliament Act introduced after the last general election has made it a bit harder to just have another general election. Essentially, Kevin, how it works is this, okay? David Cameron remains Prime Minister on Friday morning unless it's absolutely clear that he cannot remain.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be sort of Labour having 320 plus seats, okay? Unless it's absolutely clear that the Labour Party, run by Ed Miliband, is the leader, unless it's absolutely clear that they can form the next government, David Cameron remains Prime Minister. All the Secretaries of State and Ministers of State stay in place. Even Secretaries of State and Ministers who have lost their seats as MPs, they will still remain as the government. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then David Cameron has 14 days to see whether he can command a majority in Parliament. Now, it could be that after 2 days it becomes very clear he can't. But the moment that it becomes clear that he can't, either because he can't negotiate a coalition or because he tries to go to the House of Commons with a legislative programme and it gets voted down, once it becomes clear within 14 days that he cannot form a government, then he goes to the Queen, he tenders his resignation, and he will probably advise the Queen to invite Ed Miliband to be Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? When that happens, and it could happen as early as Friday morning, it could be 2 weeks. It could not happen. He could win, or he could have enough seats with other parties to run. But let's say he resigns. At that point, the Queen will very likely invite Ed Miliband to be Prime Minister, and he sets up a government, and then he has 14 days to get the approval of Parliament for his legislative programme. So there is a possibility that Ed Miliband and the Labour Party run the country for 2 weeks, but don't actually have a majority in Parliament. Yeah. But someone's got to run the country, and so that's how it works. most likely is that if David Cameron cannot command a majority in Parliament, that Ed Miliband can by a combination of coalition or agreements with, say, the Scottish Nationalist Party, who seem to be doing extremely well in the polls at the moment. So really, it's all up in the air. We all vote on Thursday. We get the results overnight on Friday, and then we see what happens. But it could be sort of drawn out for another 2, possibly 4 weeks after that.
Which is interesting because that's not the biggest news going on in England. The biggest news is it's a girl.
Yeah, the big
Oh,
news over the weekend was
yeah.
that William and Kate, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge,
Hmm.
have had a baby girl,
Hmm.
and she's been named Charlotte Elizabeth Diana.
Hmm.
Uh, or Diana, for obvious reason, Prince William's late mother, Diana, the Princess of Wales, and all the sort of emotion and history that goes with that.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's been the exciting news over the weekend. And yeah, Prince William has produced now the heir, Prince George, and the spare,
The
Princess
spare.
Charlotte. You know, and
Well, what?
and that's, the line has to go on. Line
Sure.
has to go on, and so he's kind of made sure that there are two options.
Well, and before George was born, the Queen changed the rules to allow for the princess to become queen. If I remember that correctly.
Princess to become queen. No, we changed the
I'm
rules.
trying to remember
So,
what the rule was. Okay,
yeah,
I'm a
that was interesting.
colonist.
That sounds more like the Episcopal Church there.
Yes.
But up until a year or two ago,
Right.
we had a Salic law where basically any male children jumped ahead of the female
Right.
children in the order of succession. And the rules were changed in the Privy Council, to basically say, okay, we're kind of in the 21st century now. We kind of get why historically you might wanted men rather than women, but now that isn't a problem. And we've had some damn fine queens. Queen Elizabeth II is bloody marvelous, and so it makes no sense to say that male children should supersede female children in the line of succession. So yeah, Princess Charlotte was born and is immediately fourth in line to the throne of the
Awesome.
United Kingdom.
Okay, let's get on to some church news. I mean, Anglican Unscripted has to do with some church news. Let's talk
Yeah,
about.
we can talk about the Church of England if you want.
Let's talk a little bit about what's been going on. There were promises made when there was an election to have, or a vote to have, women bishops in the Church of England. One of those
Yeah,
promises was, listen, we will try our hardest at some point to appoint a conservative evangelical who believes in the headship of the church to a position somewhere. It
yeah,
seems like this morning, from what I read, that's happened.
yeah. So we have the news this morning of the appointment of Rod Thomas
Hmm.
as the new Bishop of Maidstone. The Bishop of Maidstone is a suffragan see within the Diocese of Canterbury, and that's been sort of made into a flying bishop. We don't quite have flying bishops anymore. He's sort of provincial episcopal visitor, or whatever they call it. But basically, he is. He is a bishop coming from the complementarian conservative evangelical wing of the church, because we used to have some of those bishops sort of as diocesans and suffragans. We didn't anymore, and that was part of the kind of deal, that there would be a sort of a complementarian conservative evangelical bishop to provide episcopal resources for those conservative evangelical complementarian parishes that had women bishops and found that a problem. And Rod Thomas, of course, was previously was the head honcho of Reform, one of the conservative evangelical groups, and was instrumental in the legislative group that sort of put together the legislation around women bishops. So
Well,
in that sense, he's worked amongst the hierarchy. He did joke today that he's done absolutely everything he could to not become a bishop. But actually he's there. So one can understand why he's been appointed.
well, he also has some interest in the AMIE. Um,
Yeah. So
so
now this
now,
is this is I
I want you to give the backstory. How is the AMIE involved, and what happened with the border crossing last month?
So
Well,
the
last year.
Anglican mission in England is this sort of offshoot from the GAFCON movement that is trying to do sort of church planting and sponsoring that kind of thing
Hmm.
in the Church of England. All well and good, but we have this situation now where the AMIE plant in Salisbury had a sort of a commissioning service, and we had a retired bishop from Winchester Diocese come over, and it's not really clear still exactly what he did or didn't do in
Hmm.
commissioning. But there is currently a disciplinary process going on where the Bishop of Salisbury, Nick Holton, didn't like that. So this kind of, because Rod Thomas is on the sort of the committee, the advisory body, whatever you want to call it, for the AMIE, there's a potentially political real issue weeks away for him. I think that here he is becoming part of the establishment of the Church of England,
Hmm.
right? As the Bishop of Maidstone, and yet is a key role in this, what some people see the Church of England as very schismatic border crossing movement, AMIE. And whether you think they are schismatic, you might say, well, actually, they need to cross borders because they're going to places which need church planting because of the leadership in the Church of England doesn't provide a gospel ministry. I'm not saying that's my view. I'm saying that's what some people's views are. Even if you believe that, there's this kind of political kind of, well, what is he? Is he part of the Church of England? Or is he part of this group that some view as wanting to challenge the Church of England?
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that that's what AMIE wants to do, but that's how they're perceived to be. And I think with this whole clergy discipline measure complaint around the Salisbury plant and so on, I just think politically there's a minefield here that Rod Thomas might be walking into, and that the whole conservative evangelical constituency might be walking into. It's not that Rod Thomas isn't a perfectly viable candidate, clearly one of the main contenders. It's just that given his role in AMIE, how does that make sense? Is that actually a good move for complementarian conservative evangelicals?
Well, we've seen Archbishop of Canterbury do this before. He appointed an ACNA priest as one of the six clergy of Lambeth.
And
So,
yes, and our viewers will probably be divided on whether that's a good idea or not.
mhm.
I just think there's a sense, isn't there, that for complementarian conservative evangelicals in the Church of England to actually just take a moment to really think strategically, what do they want as the end game?
Hmm.
What politically would make that happen, and what might make that not happen, and to just think through these appointments. Would it have been better to appoint somebody like Lee Gattis, the
Sure.
chair of Church Society? Now, I know he would say, I don't want the job and all that kind of stuff, but actually he'd be, and you know what, he has this reputation for being one of the most intelligent, articulate, politically savvy operators in that sort of complementarian conservative evangelical world. Rod Thomas has got his strengths, but one person said to me today, couldn't we have had somebody just a little bit more cuddly? Well, Lee Gattis certainly fits the cuddly
Yeah.
and the politically astute sort of thing. And I know that within the sort of the reform camp in the Church of England, there's a real question as to whether they should be even playing this Bishop of Maidstone game or not. So I think there's a challenge for conservative evangelicals in the Church of England to actually come around one vision as to what they see their future. Because at the moment, I don't think there is that vision. And I think the appointment of Rod Thomas, which although he has many strengths, highlights the split in vision, because he almost articulates both sides of that vision. And I'm not sure that how long they can coexist together.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, there's one last bit of news, and I'm also wondering if this is in response to the AMIE and what happened in December. There's now an appointment for a bishop who's going to be in charge of church planting.
Yeah, so within the Diocese of London in particular,
Uh,
the ancient see of Islington has been reactivated, and there's going to be an appointment of a suffragan bishop, an assistant bishop, with a specific responsibility for mission and church planting. I spoke to a senior source in the Diocese of London in the last 48 hours who said there is already basically a name in the frame for that, and that will be revealed in due course. I think that's a natural consequence of what London Diocese have been doing. They've been working with the likes of Holy Trinity Brompton, but
right.
also sort of All Souls Langham Place in the more sort of conservative evangelical wing. They've been working very closely on church plants, planting populations also from thriving churches into sort of, dare I say, dying churches and reinvigorating them. And they do that very well, and they have no sort of boundary issues there in terms of that they are very happy to say this church is failing, we need to do something about it. So this is part of that. Now, I think that's a real contrast between south of the River Thames in London and Southwark Diocese. We have this ongoing spat where evangelicals across the spectrum, and this is not just conservative evangelicals and charismatic, this is like open evangelicals,
Sure.
right? The kind of
Nicky
the kind of
Gumbel.
evangelicals,
Yeah.
some conservative evangelicals, they aren't really evangelicals, right? Even open evangelicals are openly challenging the bishop and saying, look, actually, the way that you do appointments, the way that you handle the liberals, all says to us that you don't value us.
Mhm.
And certainly, when some of the conservative evangelical churches have wanted to plant into, dare I say, spiritually dead parishes in Southwark Diocese, the response has been totally different historically to London. And so you've got the setting up of the co-mission partnership.
Now, do you think?
Essentially an Anglican body operating outside of Southwark Diocese, within Southwark Diocese.
Well, do you think there would have been the appointment of a conservative evangelical or the church planter if not for the actions of the AMIE?
Oh, I think that they're independent.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I still wonder. This is probably going to make me unpopular with some of my colleagues here in the Church of England. I still wonder what the AMIE is for, right?
Sure.
And I think politically there's a sense of actually what is it trying to achieve
Mm-hmm.
politically? Where do its leadership see it going? How does it interact with the Church of England on the ground? Is it part of the Church of England? Is it not part of the Church of England? Exactly what is that about? And I think, once again, I think that there's a real division in terms of what the end game is and what the vision for that is. And I think until there's a coherent vision for the end game amongst the people behind these kind of initiatives, it doesn't matter how well intentioned they are.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of think, where are they headed for? And
Sure.
I think unless you know what comes with the journey to get there.
Good. All right. I want to thank you for your report today, Peter, and we'll catch up with you soon.